A light breeze rustled the pine needles along Rock Island Campground. Birds chirped. The sky was clear, blue, gentle, forgettable. But something in the silence that June morning was off. A white pickup truck sat alone, dust caked on its bumper, parked at a slant like someone had stopped abruptly and never come back. It was a 2017 GMC Sierra. The doors were locked. The driver was gone. Inside the vehicle, 3 empty child car seats, a pink blanket in the back, a juice box, unopened. No movement, no life, just a scene suspended in time. Near the truck, the air seemed to shift, heavier, colder. Beneath the trees, in a clearing not far from the road, lay the bodies of 3 young girls. They were sisters, Paityn Decker, 9, Evelyn Decker, 8, Olivia Decker, just 5. Their mother had reported them missing days earlier, when they never returned from a scheduled visitation with their father. And now, here they were, together in death, in a place where no child should have taken their final breath. The forest was quiet, but the world was about to erupt. The story began quietly, like so many stories do, at a home in Wenatchee, Washington, on a Friday evening in late May 2025. A familiar routine, a father picking up his daughters, a mother watching her girls walk down the driveway with weekend bags and smiles. It had happened before, it was court-approved, but this time they never came back. The man they left with, Travis Decker, was a 32-year-old Army veteran. No criminal record, no known history of violence. And yet, within 72 hours, his name would be plastered across national news as the prime suspect in one of the most haunting crimes of the decade. His truck, now a crime scene. His whereabouts, unknown. His 3 daughters, dead. What happened in those woods outside Rock Island? What went wrong during what should have been a routine weekend visit? Why didn't the system see the signs until it was far too late? The questions would pour in like rain, from reporters, from neighbors, from a grieving mother with nothing left to hold but memories and folded laundry that would never be worn again. But long before the headlines and search teams, before the vigils and reward posters, before the tragedy became a case, there were 3 little girls who loved to sing in the car, play with sidewalk chalk, and beg for bedtime stories they already knew by heart. There were moments, tiny, ordinary, beautiful moments, that now exist only in photographs and the echo of laughter that once filled a quiet suburban home. In the weeks that followed, this story would pull at the seams of public trust in child protection, visitation rights, and how we handle the invisible wounds that trauma leaves behind. It would spark outrage, sorrow, confusion, and more than anything, a desperate search for meaning in the midst of unimaginable loss. But to understand what really happened, we have to go back. Back before the crime scenes, before the police tape, back to the girls themselves, to who they were, and what they never got to become. Paityn was the oldest, 9 years old, but often mistaken for much older, not because of her height or appearance, but because of the way she carried herself. Quiet, thoughtful, always watching. She liked puzzles. She liked braiding her sister's hair, and she loved making lists. On her bedroom door, taped with colorful washi tape, was a hand-drawn "to-do before summer ends" list. One item simply read, "Make s'mores with Daddy." Evelyn, just a year younger, was the firecracker, the chatterbox, the one who asked questions that stopped adults in their tracks. "Why do people lie?" she once asked her teacher in the middle of a spelling quiz. She carried a worn notebook with her everywhere, its pages scribbled with short stories, unfinished poems, and little drawings of dragons. She believed in magic, Not the kind from fairy tales, but the kind that comes from kindness. She once spent all her allowance on a bouquet of flowers for a friend who had a bad day. And then there was Olivia, 5 years old. She was the heartbeat of the house, the kind of child who danced while brushing her teeth, who gave names to clouds, who cried when she saw someone else cry. On television, in real life, it didn't matter. Empathy was built into her bones. Her favorite shoes lit up when she walked, and she was known to stomp around the house just to watch them flash. Her laugh, the kind that made strangers smile, lingered long after she left a room. The three of them were a trio, inseparable. Sisters by birth, best friends by choice. They built blanket forts in the living room and whispered secrets under them until past bedtime. They performed puppet shows for their mom, used garden hoses as jungle vines, and turned every car ride into a concert. Their bond was palpable, tangible in photos, in the way they stood close to each other, always touching, always connected. Their mother, Whitney Decker, built her world around them. A single mom since 2023, she worked long hours as a dental hygienist in Wenatchee to keep the roof over their heads, the fridge stocked, and ballet shoes in the closet. By all accounts, she was attentive, loving, and structured. She attended every school conference, every pediatrician visit, every parent-child library day. The girls' lives were warm, consistent, and full of love. Wenatchee itself is a quiet, working-class city tucked between mountain ridges and river bends. The kind of town where Friday night lights still mean something, where neighbors wave from porches, and where every kid knows which houses give out full-sized candy bars on Halloween. The Deckers lived in a modest three-bedroom home on a quiet street with chalk-covered sidewalks and hydrangeas in the yard. They were part of that community fabric, participating in school plays, local bake sales, and weekend farmers markets. They went to Lincoln Elementary, a brick schoolhouse with hand-painted murals and a garden out back. Teachers there still remember Paityn helping younger students zip their coats, Evelyn reading aloud in front of the class, Olivia falling asleep during story time, curled up like a kitten on a beanbag chair. Their lives were ordinary in the most beautiful way. But there was another side to the story, a second household, a father. Travis Decker had served in the U.S. Army, deployed overseas multiple times, and returned home in 2021. By 2022, he and Whitney were divorced. Court records show a mix of shared custody, mandatory parenting classes, and psychological evaluations. There were concerns, red flags raised by Whitney and by therapists, but nothing the system deemed urgent enough to revoke visitation. Travis lived alone in a rented cabin outside Leavenworth, Washington, 40 minutes from Wenatchee, described by neighbors as quiet, sometimes friendly, but mostly isolated. He had a dog, a black and white shepherd mix named Ghost, and spent most of his time off-grid. He occasionally posted outdoorsman videos online, gear reviews, trail tips, stories from his military years. He seemed self-reliant, capable, unremarkable. But beneath the surface there was turbulence. Military records and court documents cited symptoms consistent with PTSD. A report from 2024 indicated signs of paranoia and depression. His VA file listed medications he hadn't picked up in over 6 months. He missed 2 required therapy check-ins. There were entries in Whitney's custody filings expressing concern over his unpredictable moods and dark things he would say when angry. At one point, she claimed he told her, "The world's broken and no one's going to fix it." Still, there were no incidents of violence on record, no arrests, no threats made directly to the children, and so the visits continued, 1 weekend a month. Overnight stays, return by Sunday evening. The girls were always hesitant before going, But Whitney said she didn't want to make them afraid of their father. She wanted to do the right thing, to let them have a relationship, to follow the court orders, even when her instincts said otherwise. Friday, May 30th, 2025, was one of those visitation days. It was the last day of school before summer break. The girls were excited. Paityn had packed her overnight bag the night before. Evelyn brought her journal. Olivia refused to wear anything but her unicorn t-shirt. Travis pulled up just after 5 p.m. The girls ran out to greet him. Whitney kissed each one on the forehead. "Be safe. I'll see you Sunday," she said. She stood in the doorway and watched them disappear down the street. They didn't know that would be the last time. By Saturday morning, the silence had become deafening. Whitney texted Travis around 8:30 a.m., just to check in. "How are the girls doing?" No reply. Not unusual, but as the hours stretched into the afternoon, her anxiety grew. Another message. "Are you guys okay?" Still nothing. The raid receipts never appeared. By that evening, Whitney had called him 4 times. Each one rang through. Voicemail. She tried not to panic, tried to convince herself that maybe they were out of range, maybe camping, maybe the girls had just gone off-grid for the day with their dad. Still, she knew her ex. And this wasn't like him. At 9:42 p.m. on Saturday, Whitney contacted the Wenatchee Police Department. She filed an official report. Her 3 daughters, Paityn, Evelyn, and Olivia, had not returned home, and she couldn't reach their father, Travis Decker. She explained the custody schedule, the court orders, the growing fear in her chest. Officers assured her they'd look into it. The next morning, Sunday, June 1st, the investigation formally began. The first step was a welfare check at Travis's residence, but when deputies arrived at the secluded cabin near Leavenworth, no one was home. The lights were off. The door was locked. Mail sat untouched in the box. His vehicle, a white 2017 GMC Sierra, was not in the driveway. A neighbor said they hadn't seen him since Friday. By midday, the Chelan County Sheriff's Office was involved. The situation had escalated quickly. 3 missing girls, a missing father, no answers. But surprisingly, no AMBER alert was issued. According to officials, the situation did not initially meet the criteria. There were no immediate signs of abduction, no suspect vehicle with a confirmed direction of travel, no evidence of imminent danger. At least not yet. Critics would later say this delay was deadly. Search efforts began that same afternoon. Police checked campgrounds, motels, and popular hiking spots. Drones were deployed. Phone pings were analyzed. By late Sunday evening, a potential breakthrough. Travis's cell phone had last pinged near Island Campground, an isolated area off Highway 28, southeast of Wenatchee. It was rugged terrain, sparsely populated, popular among hikers and hunters. That was when the fear really set in. Search crews focused their efforts there. On Monday morning, June 2nd, just after 7 a.m., a park ranger performing a routine patrol spotted something off the side of a gravel access road. A white pickup truck, coated in dust, parked awkwardly beneath the trees. It was Travis Decker's vehicle. The truck was locked. No one was inside, but the back seat told a story too dark to ignore. 3 car seats, a pink blanket, a backpack, half unzipped, revealing a child's drawing of a unicorn, Olivia's. Blood was visible on the inside of the passenger door. Not a lot, but enough. Authorities immediately cordoned off the scene. Crime scene investigators arrived. Sniffer dogs were brought in. Within hours, the search widened into the nearby woods. What they found was unimaginable. In a shallow depression about 200 yards from the vehicle, concealed beneath a camouflage tarp and scattered branches, were the bodies of 3 young girls, carefully placed, side by side. Each one had a plastic bag over her head. Each one was restrained with zip ties. The autopsy would later confirm what investigators suspected. The Decker sisters had been suffocated. There were no signs of struggle, no signs of outside trauma. Just silence. It was as if someone had planned this. Back in Wenatchee, Whitney received the news she had somehow already felt in her bones. "They're gone," she whispered, and the world collapsed. By Monday evening, the Chelan County Sheriff's Office held a press conference. The words came slow, deliberate, through a voice thick with emotion. "We have discovered the bodies of Paityn, Evelyn, and Olivia Decker near Rock Island Campground. We are actively searching for Travis Decker, who is now considered a suspect and potentially armed and dangerous." The manhunt began immediately. Photos of Travis were released to the public. Surveillance footage from a general store near Leavenworth showed him purchasing snacks, rope, and plastic sheeting on Thursday afternoon, just one day before he picked up the girls. It was now clear. This had been premeditated. Across the Pacific Northwest, tips poured in. Possible sightings in Yakima, then Spokane, even as far as Sandpoint, Idaho. All were investigated, none confirmed. Travis Decker had vanished. News of the sisters' deaths rocked the nation. Candlelight vigils were held in Wenatchee, Olympia, Seattle. School teachers wept on local television. Friends of the girls posted memories online, videos of birthday parties, dance recitals, school talent shows. Their lives now reduced to moments frozen in digital fragments. Whitney remained silent for 2 days. Then, on June 4th, she stood at a podium outside her home. Her voice shook, but she stood tall. "They were the light of my life," she said. "They deserved to grow up. They deserved to come home, and he took that from them." She held up a photo of her daughters, the last one taken before they left for their father's house. Then she stepped back. No further words. The country watched as one of the most devastating family tragedies in recent memory unfolded in real time. And as the days turned into weeks, one question loomed over every effort to make sense of the unthinkable. Where was Travis Decker? And why had no one stopped him before it was too late? For most parents, the days after losing a child are measured not in hours, but in shadows. Silent movements through rooms that still smell like them, clothes that still carry the weight of their bodies, shoes by the door that will never be worn again. But for Whitney Decker, the shadows multiplied. Because it wasn't one child, it was 3. And the world didn't stop. It kept spinning. Reporters knocked. Investigators called. People whispered in the aisles of grocery stores. And all she could think about was how Paityn liked her milk warmed, how Evelyn hated when her braids were too tight, how Olivia used to call ketchup red jam. In the weeks that followed, the Decker sisters were laid to rest in matching white coffins beneath a canopy of June sunlight. The funeral, held in Wenatchee's only cathedral, overflowed. Classmates in handmade dresses clutched stuffed animals and dropped pink roses into the earth. The air was thick with disbelief. But grief has a way of growing quiet after the crowds go home. The news cycle moved on. Another tragedy, another headline. But Whitney didn't move on. She moved through it. Each morning she woke up in a house that still had their backpacks by the door, cereal bowls on the counter, school drawings taped to the fridge. She left them there, for months, because removing them felt like letting go. Police continued their search for Travis Decker. A reward was increased to $25,000. Multiple agencies were involved, U.S. Marshals, FBI, local sheriff's offices across several states. His face was on digital billboards from Washington to Idaho to Montana. There were sightings, tips, and near misses, but he never resurfaced, not in any way that left a trace. Some believed he'd taken his own life and disappeared into the wilderness. Others were convinced he was hiding, using survivalist training to vanish. Rumors spread. Was he in Canada? Did he have help? Theories spiraled through forums and message boards, but the truth remained elusive. Whitney refused to call him missing. She called him running. She turned her grief into purpose. In private, she mourned, screamed into pillows, collapsed on kitchen floors, hugged the girl's clothes until her fingers ached. But in public, she became a voice. She gave interviews to NBC, CNN, and local affiliates. She spoke on morning shows, not for herself, but for them. Paityn was going to be a teacher, she told one anchor. Evelyn wanted to write books. Olivia just wanted to stay 5 forever. She made sure the world remembered their names. In the town of Wenatchee, things changed slowly. Lincoln Elementary added a memorial bench to its courtyard, a curved seat with 3 names etched in brass. Every year, on the first day of school, students leave paper cranes there. The playground swings remain one short. The community kept vigil for Whitney, for justice, for closure that never came. Some neighbors organized a Justice for the Decker Sisters run each summer. Others started trauma-informed training programs for school counselors. A local pastor opened a grief center, naming it Olivia's Room. Yet, despite it all, the one thing everyone wanted, a resolution, never came. The trail had gone cold. Months passed. Then a year. Travis Decker's profile remained online with the U.S. Marshals as one of their most wanted, but leads grew fewer. Law enforcement quietly scaled back their efforts. Officially, the case remained active. Unofficially, it hovered in a strange limbo. No body, no arrest, no answers. Whitney described it like this. Imagine screaming into a canyon over and over and never hearing an echo. In her home, the girls' rooms remained untouched. Their toothbrushes, their bedtime books, their laundry baskets. There were no birthdays that year, no Christmas tree, just candles in the windows. The only thing that changed was the silence. With the search for Travis Decker growing colder by the week, something else began to take shape. Speculation, the kind that forms in silence, in empty press rooms, on late-night message boards, in the aching gap between what is known and what refuses to be known. For law enforcement, the timeline of events remained consistent. Travis picked up his daughters on Friday, May 30th, 2025, around 5 p.m. They were never seen again. By Sunday morning, he had vanished. The truck was found Monday, and inside, traces of blood, personal items, and the unmistakable signs of preparation. The murders were planned, carried out with chilling control. But beyond those hard facts lay inconsistencies, missing links. Why that specific location, Rock Island Campground? Why that exact clearing? Investigators noted that the site was nearly a mile off the nearest trail and not a typical camping area. It wasn't scenic. It wasn't convenient. But Travis had been there before. Surveillance footage from 2 weeks prior showed him buying supplies, rope, duct tape, camouflage tarps, from a hardware store in Wenatchee. Police would later confirm this had been a long-considered plan. Yet, despite the clear signs of intent, there were pieces that didn't fit. First, the dog. Travis's German Shepherd mix, Ghost, was known to go everywhere with him, on hikes, on weekend trips, on errands. But when the truck was discovered, Ghost was gone and has never been found. Why leave behind the animal he treated like family? Some theorized that Ghost may have been killed, but there was no evidence of that. Others believed the dog had been left with someone before the weekend, possibly a friend, a contact, someone who knew more than they were saying, but no one ever came forward. Then there was the question of his disappearance itself. Could a man, unemployed, with a traceable phone history and facial recognition-ready images, really vanish completely? Surveillance footage around the time of the murders was limited. One gas station camera caught a man resembling Travis walking along Highway 28 early Saturday morning, just hours after the estimated time of death. But the image was blurry, inconclusive. By the time police reached that section of road, he was gone. And then came the border theory. Multiple tips pointed north, to Canada. Travis had spoken to a co-worker, months prior, about getting out of the country. He'd researched border crossing routes, both official and unofficial. Search history recovered from his laptop included phrases like, "How to cross into Canada without ID, emergency travel survival," and "How long before a body is unrecognizable." But no confirmed sighting ever surfaced. Not in Canada, not in the Pacific Northwest, not anywhere. Still, investigators refused to declare him dead. One officer told a local paper, "We have no body." No proof he's deceased, and he had the training to disappear. It was a chilling possibility, one that kept the public watching, wondering. As time passed, a second layer of speculation emerged, not about Travis, but about the system. Why had no AMBER alert been issued? The explanation from officials was procedural. The case didn't meet the legal definition of abduction, and there was no description of a suspect vehicle leaving the scene in a specific direction. But that didn't sit right with the public. Many felt the system had failed from the start, by allowing unsupervised visitation despite warnings, by underestimating Travis's mental health decline, by moving too slowly when Whitney first raised the alarm. In interviews, she said, "I told them something wasn't right. I knew something wasn't right." And then there were the questions surrounding the murder scene itself. The girls had been found positioned with care, cleaned, wrapped, faces covered. There were no signs of sexual assault, no post-mortem injuries. Some wondered, did he act alone? Law enforcement insists there was no evidence of another party, no extra tire tracks, no third-party DNA. But some online sleuths noted a discrepancy in the time it would have taken Travis, alone, to restrain and suffocate all three girls without a struggle. The possibility that someone else helped him, willingly or unknowingly, became a recurring theory online. Police, however, have never substantiated that. Then came the most haunting possibility of all, that Travis had rehearsed this, that this wasn't an impulsive act, but something built in quiet layers over months, maybe years, a plan born of bitterness, or control, or despair. A former Army psychologist, speaking anonymously, offered this. When a veteran with PTSD turns inward, loses identity, and isolates, especially if they feel cornered by custody loss, some may begin to view exit as the only control they have left, and tragically, in rare cases, they'll take their children with them. Still, the most painful question of all lingers. Could this have been prevented? Whitney believes yes. She had raised concerns, filed court complaints, provided documentation of Travis's instability, but the system deemed him safe enough. Safe enough for visits? Safe enough for weekends alone? The result was 3 small caskets. By the end of 2025, the search had quieted, but the questions hadn't. In Facebook groups, Reddit threads, and coffee shop corners across Washington state, people still asked, "Where is he? And if he's alive, what will it take to finally bring him back?" It was almost a full month after the Decker sisters were buried when the first new clue emerged. A stretch of silence had set in. No confirmed sightings, no new leads. The media coverage, once relentless, had slowed. For many in the public, the case had quietly slipped into the unsolved category. But for law enforcement and for Whitney, there was no such thing as moving on. Then, on a warm morning in early July, a call came in from a group of hikers. They had been walking a remote section of trail along the Stewart Range, nearly 50 miles northwest of where the girls' bodies were discovered. It was a stretch not easily accessed. No road signs, no maintained paths. Only those who knew the terrain could navigate it. But what caught their attention wasn't the trail. It was what lay near it. Under a pine tree, half covered in dirt and pine needles, was a military-style backpack. Inside, energy bars, a small flashlight, water purification tablets, a field journal with torn-out pages, and, chillingly, a Polaroid photo of the Decker sisters. It was the same image that had been widely circulated in news coverage. The girls, arm in arm, smiling on the front porch. But someone had drawn a red X over Whitney's face. It didn't take long for authorities to reach the site. Forensics confirmed the backpack had fingerprints, 2 sets. One belonged to Travis Decker, the other remained unidentified. But the match was enough. This was the first confirmed physical trace of Travis since his truck had been discovered. Suddenly, the case roared back to life. Search teams flooded the area. Helicopters scanned the tree lines. Sniffer dogs combed the forest floor. Drones equipped with thermal imaging swept the ridgelines. But the forest gave nothing back. Still, the backpack offered a new map of Travis's post-crime movements. Tucked into a side pocket was a hand-drawn route, rough sketches of elevation points, campsites, and water sources. Analysts determined that Travis had likely been moving northeast, sticking to national forest land, avoiding major roads and towns. The path suggested intent, survival, evasion. But something else in the pack chilled investigators, a crumpled envelope, never sent, with a note inside. The handwriting matched samples from Travis's military records. The note read, "They're at peace now. The world wasn't safe. I did what I had to do." That line became the focal point of news reports for weeks. Some anchors read it aloud, others refused. But no one denied what it meant. This wasn't a snap decision. It was a world view, a justification, a manifesto boiled down to one cold sentence. Whitney, upon hearing the contents, reportedly said only, "He didn't do what he had to do. He did what he wanted to do." The press response was immediate. The story hit national headlines again. Crime correspondents flooded Chelan County. Decker Trail became a trending term on social media as users dissected every known step. Podcasts released deep-dive episodes. Online sleuths tried to decode the map. Some praised the investigators for renewed effort. Others criticized the slow pace. The FBI reallocated resources to the manhunt. The reward was raised to $50,000. A tip line received over 1,200 calls in the following 10 days. Some credible, most not. And then came the doorbell footage. A family in Ellensburg, Washington, reported that their camera had captured a man walking along their back fence late at night, barefoot, wearing what appeared to be camo pants and a dark hoodie. The footage, grainy and lit only by porch light, showed the man moving quickly, head low. Law enforcement released a still image to the public. Dozens claimed it was Travis, but without facial recognition or a clear timestamp, the lead fizzled. Still, momentum had returned. Investigators began re-interviewing people from Travis's past, former Army contacts, hunting buddies, even a childhood friend who had moved to Idaho. No one admitted to seeing him, no one claimed to know where he might go, but one former military colleague, speaking on background, said something that stuck. If he's out there, he's not panicking. He knows how to disappear. The real question is, how long does he want to stay gone? As law enforcement shifted their search pattern, Whitney did something unexpected. She returned to Rock Island Campground. It was early August. Quiet. Unbearably quiet. She walked the trail where her daughters had taken their final steps. She left 3 small wind chimes tied to tree branches. Paityn's was shaped like a book. Evelyn's looked like a crescent moon. Olivia's sparkled pink. Whitney didn't speak to reporters that day. She didn't need to. The world had seen enough of her pain, but she left a note in a mason jar near the base of the tree where they'd been found. No one was supposed to read it, but someone did. The backpack changed everything. Until then, the case had drifted into quiet territory. Investigators rotating off the task force, tips trickling into voicemail inboxes, the public moving on. But with a fresh trace of Travis Decker, his prints, his handwriting, and a chilling note, it was no longer a cold case. It was an open hunt. The Chelan County Sheriff's Office reopened their command center within 24 hours of the discovery. Maps were unrolled, schedules reposted. For the first time in weeks, agents from the FBI and U.S. Marshals returned to the area with new urgency. The field journal and crude map inside the pack weren't just scribbles, they were data. Analysts used satellite imagery and topographical overlays to match hand-drawn waypoints to real terrain. Several symbols lined up with known backcountry shelters, snowpack camps, and even a disused ranger station near the enchantments, an alpine region notorious for being both beautiful and brutal. They believed he was moving, slow, deliberate, strategic. More teams were deployed to scour these points. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Dogs barked through dense undergrowth. Drones with infrared sensors zipped between treetops. The perimeter expanded. A temporary ranger blockade was put in place around Icicle Ridge Trail, and all nearby campsites were checked. Some hikers were questioned. None had seen anyone matching Travis's photo. But one group recalled something strange. Around June 20th, deep in the wilderness, a campfire still warm, abandoned just minutes before their arrival. Half-eaten food, boot prints, the impression of someone sitting cross-legged, alone. They hadn't thought anything of it, until now. Meanwhile, investigators began reanalyzing old evidence with new eyes. The truck. When Travis's pickup had been discovered, investigators had collected fingerprints, blood samples, tire tracks. But with advances in forensic processing and renewed federal lab access, previously inconclusive samples were retested. One fragment, barely visible, was lifted from the plastic bag used in Olivia's suffocation. It matched Travis. But that wasn't what startled investigators. It was the meticulousness, the way each girl was placed, the materials used, clean, prepared, consistent. It didn't look chaotic. It didn't look rushed. It looked intentional. Authorities now believed that Travis had rehearsed this. He had scoped the terrain, tested supplies, chosen the exact location long before May 30th. His military background, once considered a footnote, was now central. He had the skills, the patience, the mindset, and if he was alive, he still had the upper hand. Public attention surged again. News networks broadcast updates hourly. Footage of the discovered backpack aired alongside excerpts of Travis's note. The words, "They're at peace now," played in a loop, drawing ire, horror, and endless commentary. In Wenatchee, it was harder to breathe. Whitney was no longer granting interviews. Her lawyer released a statement. Whitney supports the continuing investigation and hopes justice will be served in her daughter's names, but she will not publicly engage with the man responsible for their deaths. But others stepped up. A retired detective who had worked the early days of the case began appearing on podcasts, describing the toll the case took on the town, the investigators, the volunteers. We walked through those woods for days, hoping to find them alive. We didn't, and that stays with you. One journalist uncovered emails from the original custody proceedings, documents showing that Travis had refused mental health follow-ups in late 2024. A letter from his VA counselor noted increased isolation, fatalistic language, and paranoia. The phrase, "he feels abandoned by the system and his family," appeared 3 separate times. It wasn't just a missed red flag, it was a neon warning that no one had acted on. By mid-August, a new national task force was created, Project Everwatch. Its goal, track fugitives with military training who may be exploiting wilderness or survivalist tactics to avoid capture. Travis Decker became its first profile. A full psychological profile was released to the public. It painted a complex, haunting portrait. He was methodical, controlled, likely operating without electronics. He preferred wooded, isolated regions. His survival gear, based on recovered items, suggested he could live off-grid for months at a time. He knew how to avoid thermal detection, how to track animals, how to disguise his scent. He had been trained for war, but the profile also exposed his likely weaknesses: guilt, isolation, self-loathing. They believed he might make a mistake, seek contact, leave another message. The hunt, they said, was not over. It had just entered its next phase. The last confirmed development came on August 29, 2025. A trail camera in the Okanogan-Wenatchee National Forest captured a lone man moving through the trees well after midnight. He moved quickly, covered in layers, face partially obscured, but when stills were pulled from the footage, the body type, the gait, the build, it looked like Travis. It was enough for authorities to relocate search teams, but when they reached the site, he was gone. A single boot print remained in the mud, size 11, just like his. The forest gave nothing easily. Weeks turned into months. Summer melted into fall. The trail camera footage became a ghost of its own, still debated, still inconclusive. Travis Decker remained a shadow in the trees, but law enforcement hadn't stopped looking. Not yet. On the morning of October 17, 2025, a hunter deep in the Okanogan-Wenatchee National Forest came across something strange. About 2 miles from the nearest trailhead, at the base of a rocky incline, partially hidden beneath an outcrop of moss and shale, was a crude shelter. No roof, just pine branches, dirt walls, and the skeletal frame of a lean-to. There was no one inside, but there were signs of life. A pile of clothing, a camp stove, a knife embedded in a log, empty cans stacked in a corner. Nearby, a fire pit filled with burnt paper. Some scraps were still intact. Among them, a map of Wenatchee, circled in red ink, Whitney's neighborhood. That discovery triggered an immediate response. Within hours, a tactical search team swept the surrounding 5 miles. They moved quietly, carefully. The terrain was uneven, steep in parts, and the elevation made even seasoned rangers catch their breath. And then, finally, they found him. Face down, motionless, about 700 feet from the shelter, at the edge of a dry creek bed. Travis Decker. He was dead. A Sig Sauer P226 handgun rested in his right hand, the same sidearm model used by his unit during his Army deployments. The autopsy later confirmed what investigators suspected: suicide by gunshot. Based on body temperature and decomposition, he had likely taken his life 24 to 48 hours before discovery. He had been living just miles from his daughter's final resting place. News broke across the country. The manhunt was over. The monster gone. But it wasn't closure. Not really. At the Wenatchee Police Department, Sheriff Tom Reese stood at the podium, flanked by FBI officials. His statement was short. "We have confirmed the identity of Travis Decker. He was located deceased in a remote area of the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest. No other individuals are believed to be involved. The investigation is now closed." For Whitney, the call came before the press conference. She sat in her living room, the same one where birthday parties had been held, where Easter baskets still sat untouched in the hallway closet. She said nothing for a long time. When she finally spoke to reporters 2 days later, her voice was quiet, firm. "I wanted him to face what he did. I wanted him to answer for it. But now I just want peace." The FBI released a summary of evidence recovered from Travis's final shelter: journals, drawings, old family photos, letters never mailed. He had been documenting his thoughts. Most of it was incoherent, fragments of fear, bitterness, fatalism. But one line appeared again and again: "They couldn't live without me." It wasn't an explanation. It was an indictment. Experts weighed in. A trauma psychologist on Dateline described the writings as textbook narcissistic collapse, viewing the children not as individuals but as extensions of himself. Another expert described it more bluntly: control. That's what this was about. There would be no trial, no courtroom, no cross-examination, but the truth was out. He did it. He planned it. And in the end, he chose to die before ever facing the consequences. The evidence was overwhelming. The autopsy confirmed that no other persons had been involved in the murders. The zip ties, the bags, the bodies, they were all tied to Travis. The backpack, the campfires, the DNA, the final campsite. It was him. One man, 3 lives stolen, 1 shattered family. And now, silence. For some, the discovery brought relief. For others, rage. Online forums lit up with questions. Why hadn't this ended sooner? Why hadn't he been caught months earlier? Could something, anything, have changed the outcome? But in Wenatchee, no one was asking those questions anymore. They were lighting candles, again. Even after the confirmation, the press conferences and the headlines declaring "Travis Decker found dead," something remained unsettled. It wasn't just grief. It was something deeper. A heaviness in the air, a sense that the story still had cracks in it, spaces where light never reached, spaces where truth had shadows. The question wasn't if Travis Decker killed his daughters. That was never in doubt. The forensics were clear. The notes, the positioning, the timeline, undeniable. But what haunted people was why. Why did a father, seemingly stable, seemingly affectionate, make the decision to end the lives of his own children? There were theories, diagnoses, speculations, but no answers that truly made sense to the people left behind. Psychologists pointed to PTSD, untreated and festering. Court records showed a man growing paranoid, withdrawn, unwell, but those were pieces, not a whole, not enough to explain the kind of quiet evil that unfolds under a summer sky in the woods. And what about the system? Why had Travis been granted unsupervised visitation just months before? The custody documents showed that Whitney had raised concerns, formally, more than once. In one filing, she detailed how Travis had shown up late, disoriented, and refused to say where he'd been with the girls. A Child Protective Services investigator had followed up, but there was no intervention. No flags were raised. No visitations suspended. In hindsight, it felt obvious. In real time, it had been bureaucracy. That failure haunted Whitney more than anything. Not her own decisions. She had followed the law, honored the court orders, but the knowledge that her trust in the process had cost her everything. She later told a grief counselor, "I let them go with him because I didn't want to be the mom who said no. I didn't want to be the one who made them afraid of their dad. I thought I was doing the right thing." Those words would become central to public discussion, not just about the Decker case, but about visitation laws, family court, mental health screenings for parents, and how the state defines danger. A bill was introduced in the Washington state legislature just months later, the Decker Act. It proposed mandatory mental health evaluations for non-custodial parents with a history of psychiatric instability or prior trauma-related diagnoses. It passed the House, and then stalled in committee. Justice, in its legal form, had died with Travis, but accountability, emotional, societal, systemic, was still being chased. Detectives on the case were changed, too. One later admitted, "It was the kind of case that keeps you awake. Because you didn't find them in time. Because no one did. Because he had left clues. The shopping receipts, the searches, the threats in disguise. But no one put it together until it was too late." Online, true crime communities dissected every detail. Reddit threads explored the psych profile. TikTok creators walked viewers through the final site of the camp. YouTubers played out theories, compared timelines, wondered aloud if there were earlier warning signs that had been erased or missed. But the mystery wasn't about facts anymore. It was about the wound. A wound carried by a mother whose entire world had been ripped away in a single weekend. A wound carried by classmates who still leave 3 empty chairs in the corner of the Lincoln Elementary art room. A wound carried by a town that now counts before and after the Decker case as 2 different lifetimes. And still, some questions refuse to go quiet. What would have happened if the AMBER alert had been issued? What if officers had acted sooner? What if he had been stopped at the hardware store? What if he had asked for help? What if someone had listened? The tragedy of the Decker sisters is not just that they died, it's that they died in the space between procedures, between paperwork and prevention, between silence and action. And that space? It still echoes. After the body was found and the search was over, there was a strange kind of silence that settled over Wenatchee. A silence that wasn't about fear anymore. It was about the weight of everything that had already happened. There were no more questions, no more manhunt briefings, no more missing posters to tape on gas station windows, just the aftermath. For Whitney, life split cleanly into 2 timelines, before May 30th, 2025, and after. Before was mornings filled with mismatched socks and cereal bowls and tiny voices arguing over cartoons. After was walking into a house that still smelled like bubble bath and strawberry shampoo, but had no sound at all. In the weeks following Travis Decker's confirmed death, Whitney disappeared from public view. She shut off social media, declined interviews, stopped responding to messages from news stations asking for one last quote. She said she was tired of being brave. Instead, she began to rebuild, quietly. She moved out of the home where she had raised her daughters, gave away their clothes 1 box at a time. She kept 3 things: Evelyn's notebook, Paityn's charm bracelet, and Olivia's tiny light-up shoes. She said she couldn't throw away the sound they made. A year later, Whitney returned to Lincoln Elementary, not as a parent, but as a speaker. She'd been invited to talk to a room full of teachers, counselors, and school psychologists about signs to watch for. things they missed, things she missed. It wasn't easy, but she did it, because, in her words, if they're gone and the world doesn't change, then they're really gone. She began working with local nonprofits on family violence prevention, helped fund a scholarship in her daughter's names, donated books to the school library, spoke at state legislature hearings on custody reform. Her grief became motion. Her motion became legacy. In the town itself, the Decker case changed the way people talked about safety. A new task force was created within the Chelan County Sheriff's Office to assess visitation-related risk. They added new mental health training for officers. Child services protocols were reviewed. The school board introduced a new policy. If a student's caregiver reports concern, it triggers a secondary alert system, even if the law says visitation is permitted. It wasn't enough to fix what had happened, but it was something. Detectives who worked the case admitted that it followed them home. One said he still dreams of the truck, the way the door creaked when they opened it, the way the car seats looked so ordinary inside such a terrible story. Another refused to take custody cases for 6 months afterward. He needed time. He needed air. The community held a memorial on the 1-year anniversary, not just for the girls, but for everyone who had been changed by them. In the park where they used to play, 3 trees were planted, cherry, lilac, and maple, the colors each girl loved. A plaque sits at their base. Paityn, Evelyn, Olivia, you were our joy. You are still our light. Children play beneath those trees now, some too young to remember the news stories, too young to know what the names on the plaque mean, but their parents remember. And that's the legacy that lives now, not just in laws or changes or gardens, but in how people watch more closely, how teachers ask softer questions, how neighbors follow up, how parents listen to instincts they once second-guessed. The Decker sisters never came home, but in 100 quiet ways their story stayed. You would think a story like this would end when the suspect dies, but it didn't. In the months and years that followed, the case of the Decker sisters took on a life of its own, not in the way tabloid stories fester, but in the way collective grief refuses to be forgotten. The wind chimes Whitney had tied to the trees at Island Campground still hang there today. Locals occasionally hike the area just to hear them. Some say they ring louder than they should. Others say they don't ring at all unless you're quiet enough to listen. A filmmaker from Seattle released a short documentary called 3 Pines, named after the girls' memorial trees. It played at indie festivals and focused not on the crime, but the people it left behind. The teachers, the neighbors, the counselors who found themselves weeping in the staff lounge. The sound design included a recurring motif, 3 harmonized notes fading into silence. The GoFundMe that once raised $1.3 million for Whitney and her daughter's memorials is now a registered foundation. It offers emergency relocation support for parents in dangerous custody battles. In the first year alone, it helped 62 families move to safety. There's an annual walk in Wenatchee now. Steps for the sisters. People wear pink, purple, and sky blue. They write the girls' names on ribbons. Some carry drawings. One child, just 5 years old, held a balloon and told a reporter, "It's for Olivia." She was 5, like me. Across the state, other families began to speak out. Mothers and fathers who'd been afraid to challenge visitation orders, who'd worried they'd be punished in court for overreacting. The Decker case gave them permission to say, "Something feels wrong." In 2026, Washington passed the Paityn, Evelyn, and Olivia Protection Protocol, a state-level law that enhances judicial authority to require supervised visitation, even when there's no criminal history, if credible mental health red flags are present. It was called overdue, but it was called justice. Still, for many, the emotional dust never quite settles. Podcasts retell the story. Documentaries dissect it. Reddit users post theories about Travis's final weeks, his food caches, his journals, his mindset. Some focus on the missed signs, others still believe he had help. A small but persistent number question whether Travis's death was truly suicide, pointing to inconsistencies in the trajectory of the bullet, the position of the body. The sheriff's office has responded, "The case is closed. The forensics are clear. No foul play." But that's the thing about true stories. Even when they're over, they echo. In classrooms, teachers now keep emergency contact logs updated more carefully. Social workers speak more assertively in family court. Judges, some quietly, now ask additional questions about parental mental health because of what happened in 2025. In Whitney's new home, an apartment in a neighboring town, there's a framed drawing near the kitchen window. 3 stick-figure girls, a sun, a tree, and in a child's handwriting, the word home. It was the last picture Evelyn ever made. Whitney didn't hang it for decoration. She hung it to remember. Remember that once there were 3 little girls with warm cheeks and mismatched socks who thought the world was safe because their mother loved them, and that was supposed to be enough. Sometimes Whitney still visits the park at sunset. Not to cry, but to watch the light change. She says it reminds her of the girls, each of them a different color fading into the horizon. Someone once asked her what justice felt like. She said, "It doesn't feel like anything. It's just what you do after. You carry the story, you carry the silence, and you make sure no one else has to." Some stories don't leave you. They sit in the space between breath and memory, between what happened and what should have never happened. The story of the Decker sisters is not just about a crime, it's about the quiet devastation of trust, the betrayal that wears a familiar face, the danger that hides in plain sight. It's about 3 little girls who loved bubbles and bedtime songs and laughing in the car. 3 little girls who never got to finish growing up. Paityn, Evelyn, and Olivia weren't symbols. They weren't statistics. They were children. They had best friends, favorite colors, pajamas they insisted on wearing too many nights in a row. They had dreams, some big, some beautifully ordinary. Paityn wanted to be a teacher. Evelyn wrote stories. Olivia wanted to ride a real unicorn. That's who they were. And one man, someone meant to protect them, ended all of that. The house they left from that Friday evening in May 2025 is no longer theirs. The toys, the drawings, the laughter, it's all gone now. But sometimes, Whitney says, she still hears their footsteps in her dreams, one after the other, soft and small. For some, justice was found when Travis Decker's body was discovered. For others, justice died with the girls. We may never know the full truth of what drove him to that forest, what switch flipped, what story he told himself as he carried out something so final, so cruel, so unthinkable. We only know what remains. A mother living a life she never imagined, a town changed in ways too quiet for headlines, and a nation forced to ask itself, how many warnings do we need before we listen? There are names carved in stone now, trees planted, laws proposed, photos framed, but none of those things replace what was taken. They only mark the space where innocence used to live. In a way, the Decker case was solved. But solved isn't the same as healed. And that's the truth no report can write, no forensic team can catalog, no press conference can explain, because there are stories we understand, and then there are stories we carry. This one? This one stays with you. The next time you hear a story like this, one that seems too tragic to be real, pause. Don't just ask how it happened. Ask why we didn't stop it. Ask what more we could have done. Ask yourself, did they disappear? Or were they erased? Because sometimes the most haunting mystery is not where the missing went, but how long we waited to look.